Hey everybody, happy Monday. So we are here to talk about having a shared OKR between development, PM, UX, and possibly QE around improving MR usability. There's a lot of momentum behind this. One, because it's a major negative theme that we've found through SUS, and then there were some hacker news threads, and Sid also brought this up. So I think this is good timing is what I'm getting at. This is an important one. So what I wanted to do today was to get a little more clarity around what the plan for that would be, because this is an interesting thing to share an OKR on because it is owned by a group. And I know Marcel and I had been talking through possible approaches to it, but I think that's actually kind of changed based on some things that he and Pedro have recently learned. So I'm going to turn it over to Marcel and you can catch us up. And of course, Pedro, you got a ton of information on this, so please weigh in at any time.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks so much for that introduction. What I would like to start off is really driving home that we try to find areas so far where we can involve other teams as well. We wanted for the OKR to have this be a collaborative OKR and not just focused on the areas that the code review team is already doing. So we were trying to look for opportunities to improve where we can bring in many different teams and that also bring us forward on the merge request itself. The first idea that we saw was the merge widgets. We have been working, and by we, I mean Pedro. Pedro has been amazingly working on a new design framework for the merge widget, and that's already being split down into smaller implementable MVCs with the engineers. And please, Pedro, interrupt me if I'm saying anything slightly incorrect or completely incorrect. But that one is already being handled. Go ahead.
Oh, cool. And I'll interrupt just to say, hey, Pedro, do you have any visuals that you could share with us right now that would give the folks who are watching this video an indication of what we're talking about?
Your sound is really low, Pedro. I didn't hear that, but.
Okay, apologies. Is it better now? Okay. Yes, let me share my screen. Yep. Yeah, I don't know, Marcel, if you want this as a backdrop to what you're saying, or if you want me to very quickly in some seconds describe what it is.
Yeah, feel free to take over and quickly give an introduction to this.
Okay, so we recognize that there is not a consistent structure in our merge widget, which is one of the many merge request widgets that controls that shows information about what's blocking or not the merge action in merge requests, and also displays information and options that affect how the merge is going to be performed. And this is the current view. And here's an example of what I explored to have a more consistent and usable. In the end, I think it's just more focusing on usability 101, more usable experience with separation of information, options, and actions. And this was then translated. You can see all of these little boxes here. All of these are different states or versions or variants, how you want to call them, of how this widget is displayed. And this is the structure that I started using to apply to all of them. So this is the consistent structure that you can then change the options, the titles, the actions, etc.
Do you have a rough number how many different states this one widget had?
Oh God. Okay, I can try a rough number. Let me see. So
or whether
what I
it's
did,
5, 15, 50.
so I did the mapping. It would be anywhere between 18 and I would say maybe 30 states, maybe. I would say it's huge, and there's a lot of variations, as you can see here. But yeah, a lot of things. In total, let me just quickly, and again for a visual, which is easier for people that are watching to understand. I uploaded all of the screenshots that I took from all of the different states. Well, not all of them, but the ones that were logical enough to share. And you can see here the number of states and all of the different variations that can come just from this one widget. We're not talking about the others in the merge request page, just this one widget.
So every single one of those states needs to be redesigned to adhere to the new improved visual structure and then separately implemented. Is that something that we could break the work out so that even if, so we could have a designer from the secure team work on some of these states and then even have a group outside of code review implement the changes once we've got them all figured out?
So we already started breaking down this into the most manageable pieces. And one of our front-end engineers in code review already created the issues that would be necessary for us to make the big changes that you see here. Not all of them. I then created a separate file that contains just the minimum changes. So when I say minimum, the most low effort, but at the same time impactful changes that we can make. And it would result in the following changes here. So each of these blocks that you can see here could be considered a big group of changes that then contains smaller changes within. And our front-end engineer, Phil, already broke down and created issues for each one of these. We just haven't prioritized them. So in terms of design, everything is already here. We just need to implement them. And Phil has already created issues for them. At the same time, we are working on the copy separately because it's something that doesn't require any of the changes that we're making here. And I'm already working with Amy Qualls, our technical writer, to change and improve the copy of anything that appears in that widget. But again, this is just the merge widget, not the other merge request widgets like security, Terraform, code quality, et cetera, et cetera.
Got it. Okay, so what I'm hearing is the merge widget, we know that it needs distinct usability improvements, but code review teams got it. You've got the designs, you're working on the UI copy, it's broken down for implementation. The code review team feels like they can take this on by themselves. Awesome.
Yes.
So
yes,
if we don't do the merge widget, then what are some of our other options?
The other option, and Pedro, if you would let me take over the screen sharing, that we wanted to propose was looking at the other merge request widgets. These are currently in a state where there's big differences between each of these. Like if we expand the list on this one, this is a completely different design to if you expand the list on this one. And there's also a couple of other usability problems like the iconography. It doesn't really show the impact that it should signal to the user. It's not really clear what it contains. A lot of users get confused that these show changes due to the changes of this merge request, which is not the case. They can also contain information that's over the entire repository. Like for example, for security scanning here, we have 1,272 potential vulnerabilities. That has no relation at all to the 5 changes we have made in this. And that's where we can make big improvements. So we wanted to focus on these merge request widgets in the area of consistency, iconography, and clarifying communication.
And oh God, get rid of all of the buttons. Good Lord. Please. Okay, cool. So
by the way,
that sounds
Christy,
like, go ahead. Yes.
if I may, I just wanted to introduce that we've already shipped a code solution that provides an infrastructure for code for merge request widget extensions. The current status right now is that the widget is, sorry, the extension is published. It's ready to be used, but this implementations are so much more complex than the basic version that we have, but that provides a good vehicle for them to conform to one pattern. So we do have that ready, so we can pick that up and evolve that if we so choose to.
Okay, so there is a new framework in place for how merge request widgets should be designed. And
very basic, correct.
We just need help
In the
now
code,
with designers to say, hey, okay, this is how this fits into that framework. And then
and engineering as well. So the effort of conforming this very complex widgets to a new implementation would take its toll, and it has its cost. But yes,
that seems like that would have a very impactful usability impact.
Right. It would be consistent. It would be consistent, and it would be controlled by the same code base. Correct.
Got it. Okay, cool. So between the merge widget and the merge requests widgets, if we could get through all of those, now we've made a good improvement. What else is possible?
Yeah, the second big topic that we thought about was, and it's actually number 3 on the agenda. We did a survey both for internal and for external users around what the biggest pain points are when using merge requests. And the one that's standing out by far is dealing with large MRs. This is where we could have a look at how can we improve perceived and actual performance on the merge request. And I'm pretty sure that this is also a topic where there could be a lot of support needed from other groups, from other teams, and where we could separate or where we could share the load a bit between the different teams.
Yeah, I think that's what Sid was keying in on in the product key meeting. He brought up problems with diffs. So that seems like a good thing to focus on.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about having help from other groups here. We can, I think we can and we should, and we are leveraging experts on the code base. Most of the struggles that we're having, like from medium to large sized MRs, has to do with the metric of total blocking time that is really high, and the memory usage and the number of components on the page. And a lot of the work in the code to improve those situations require extensive knowledge of the code base. And that's why we've been syncing up within our team, but also reaching out to Natalia, Vue expert, and also Dennis Missionov from performance perspective to get some insights on how we can improve these things. We have some ideas, and we have been discussing that within the group. I think eventually the help from other stages would be very beneficial for the widget. I think from the performance perspective, in terms of the code, I think it would be a little bit challenging to have them come play in our playground without having that extensive knowledge in the code base. We'll definitely welcome all the hands, but that would come with a bit of an onboarding process as well.
Got it. What about from a design perspective, Pedro? Would it be helpful to you to have multiple designers working through the problem of large MRs?
I mean, right now, I think, so from the UX side, the only thing that we have actionable is the issue that I linked there in point B, which is perhaps changing how files are viewed in large merge requests. So we would automatically switch between viewing multiple files stacked, or if you have a very large merge request, you would only view one file at a time. But this hasn't been validated yet. And what I'm doing right now is working on a synthesis of all of the research that we've done on large merge requests and feedback, so that we can understand what large MRs mean to users. And is it, because there's a distinction here that we haven't been able to nail down. Is a large MR a merge request that feels sluggish, that the experience feels slow? Or is it a large MR because, yeah, the experience is good, I can scroll up and down and navigate without a problem, but I have trouble managing the number of files and number of changes in my mind so I can review, right? So one is the flow itself, the other is the usage of the product. And we haven't been able to make that distinction. And that's what I hope to do with this synthesis. And at the same time, provide some light on what would be the most actionable things that we can do today. Like, what are the stepping stones that are stable right now that we can put our feet on and say, okay, we are sure that this is good and we can move forward with this. Because even that issue that I talked about, automatic changing to a single file mode, it's an idea that we think could address it, but it's not addressing what we know is the root problem, which is just the pure performance of merge requests. So from the UX side, I don't think we have anything actionable right now. And in terms of collaborating with other designers, I feel like in the short term, given that there are a lot of unknowns, that having Sanjung with us for these 3 milestones could be good, and that I could delegate and have her collaborate with me in some of these issues. But of course, if I feel like this is something bigger, we would need more involvement, and I would reach out to other designers. But for the time being, it's too soon to say.
Do you need to do additional research, or is it just synthesizing the research you've already done?
That's what I'm trying to find out.
Got it. When do you think you'll know the answer to that?
I think this week we will have an answer to that. Great.
That gives us a lot of time. So why don't we kind of put that as a possible, because we could get designers to help you just with even the research, because that's a lot of like interviewing effort and whatnot. Okay, so next week, plan to tell me whether or not that would be helpful to you. Okay, and then number 4, Marcel.
Yes, number 4, we have looked at more smaller isolated topics that don't require much background and that don't have like large implications on the other direction items that the code review team is currently shipping. One of the ones that stood out is mobile view. We currently have a lot of trouble in mobile view with simple things. Like, for example, sometimes names break up in a way that instead of like having names horizontally, they become names vertically, 1 letter each line. And there's a lot of these smaller things that we could try to fix and generally make our mobile code review experience better.
Is that something that we already know enough about to where we could create a series of small issues that other teams could pick up?
I would have to check with Pedro and Andre if they feel like this is the case.
Yeah. So the specific aspect that Marcel mentioned, the mobile view, I think so. I left some ideas in that issue that is linked there that could be implemented in the short term. Of course, it would be interesting to have other designers, 1 or 2 other designers review it, especially Holly. She has been collaborating with there as well. So it would be just, hey, does this still make sense? Because it's a fairly old proposal 3 months ago. And Andrea has also been involved with it. So I would assume, correct me if I'm wrong, Andrea, I think that is actionable. but I'm more concerned about what I mentioned in point B there, just the fact that we don't have an holistic approach to comments and threads. Yes, we have designed fairly recently the comments and threads. I would say maybe 2 years ago, we landed a dramatic redesign of the activity feed, but we still have feedback from users that feed, activity comment feed, is difficult to parse. And also the comments and threads are difficult to distinguish. And we, all the four of us here in this call, I think we can also agree that sometimes when there's a lot of comments, you just don't know what is a comment anymore, or what is a thread. And so I think this goes far beyond merge requests, and it would affect issues and epics as well. So this is, I think it would be a great win, because commenting is one of the most important flows in the product, especially for us as an async company. That is what we do. And if it's not efficient, it's affecting the company's efficiency. So this is not just for merge requests. It would be for everyone, and it would be a cross-stage, one product experience that we would need to take an holistic approach at.
Okay, I think it's a great idea. Okay, so what I'm trying to get at is we want to improve MR usability probably across 2 quarters, and we want to figure out how we're going to break that work up, and we want to be able to see the impact of that in both quarters. So if we just go ahead and say, okay, for UX in Q2, we're going to be working on redesigning the merge request widgets, pardon me, but we know that those won't make it into implementation during Q2. Those really have to happen in Q3 because we have to have that lead time to get there. We know that the code review team is working on refactoring the merge widget from a performance perspective, and then also making usability improvements, but just within the code review team. That's really positive. And we could include that in the OKR if that's part of your plans anyway. But what do we have other developers from outside of code review working on during Q2?
Yeah, that's a great question. And one idea that Pedro brought up in an earlier meeting was we still have a number of open issues from an earlier async design critique on the MR page. We have an epic from this, or we have an issue from this that has a lot of linked issues. And there's still quite a few directly actionable. I think all of them are design ready issues that other teams could easily pick off. So that list could be a great first step at this.
Okay, so we could have, because I know that there are a limited number of merge request widgets, and I think there were about 5 teams those were spread across. So we could say, hey, those teams, you're just focused on merge request widgets. Everybody else, we have this backlog of things that are ready to go. Go in and pick up whatever looks interesting to you during Q2. Okay.
Yep. And one additional issue that Pedro brought up earlier as well is one that's shared with project management or product planning. I don't know which one it was anymore, but it was about making start thread the default instead of writing a comment on the activity feed. That's, I think, already now promoted to an epic that has a lot of discussion. I think it has about 95 upvotes. It has been a big topic for quite some time. Maybe this would also be a very impactful one that we could prioritize as part of this.
Okay, so my request would be, if you think that's a good one, to have it implementation ready at the start of Q2. Okay.
And that's exactly what we are checking before we make sure it's design ready.
Okay. Yep. Christopher, thank you for joining us. How are you feeling about what you're hearing?
Gosh, you asked me how I'm feeling. Question. Right now I'm just listening in. I'm trusting the team is making the right calls as far as various pieces of this. I think one thing that jumped out at me is we really need an intuition about this, and I feel like we're still trying to figure out what the intuition should be. Whether it's like things are really running too slow, or or I'm really having a hard time finding information because it's not presented in a way that makes it easy for me to do my job. And we've done a number of things to improve performance. So I'm kind of curious to see if that's really the case. And that's what kind of where my inclination is to think in terms of, it's probably more towards the, how do we make people have a more effective workflow? But that's a personal opinion as opposed to something that's data driven or backed by information. So I think that's probably the biggest concern I have is like, the answer may be both, but it's almost like I would expect there still to be some bias one way or the other there that would potentially cause us to basically have some people assignment bias based on it, if that makes sense.
Christopher, if I may, you're absolutely correct. I don't think we've ever given up on performance work on merge requests. We've always been shipping, and OKRs have been permanently focusing on this. You're asking for intuition, and my intuition looking at the work we have been shipping, I don't think there's any part of GitLab's code base that has had as much focus on performance as merge request diffs. The way we load diffs in batches, the way we load a bunch of things in batches and have different ways of loading them is particularly sophisticated. What I do get the intuition is that people are struggling with the operation of the merge request when they're medium to large. And that speaks about memory usage and particularly some memory leaks that we might have on a polling system. So it's particularly technical debt that is accrued over time. And even though we have been focusing on things, and Phil just shipped a couple of hours ago an improvement on the total blocking time part, this is an ongoing battle that we have. And I do think they do overlap with UX a lot, particularly on this example that Pedro gave, that we want to trigger an automatic file by file mode, but that has an impact on UX. How will users react? Is that an option? Is that something that I want to do as default or opt in? All of those things are elegant solutions for people to use, but some people might really reject them. So there's two ways. One is improving the feature set. The other is the nitty gritty internal work to improve the code-based performance. And we're focusing on both, I think.
Yeah, and that's where, Andre, you, in your dedicated time, you mentioned that this is kind of some of the work that you want to basically dedicate folks to from that perspective. Okay. Okay, cool.
So I feel like, 'cause I know at the end of our time here, we have a loose plan. So it feels like our next steps are to codify that in an issue proposal, an OKR issue proposal. And that's something Marcel and I can take a stab at and then ask for feedback from other folks on. Okay, cool. All right.
Sounds great, Christy. Thanks for all the help.
Yeah, thank you all. I really appreciate it. This is a big deal. So thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.